Okay, good morning, everybody. Today we're going to start on lesson six, which is basically the rise of communism. We're going to focus on a few things: Jiangxi Soviet, the Long March, Yan'an Soviet, and the leadership of Mao Zedong during this period up to 1936. Okay, so let's begin. Now, let me just give the context. So, we have already learned about the First United Front. We learned about the Northern Expedition. And of course, after the Northern Expedition, or once Jiang realized that he was about to unite China, he launched the White Terror, whereby he betrayed the communists and attacked them. 1927, Mao Zedong launches the Autumn Harvest Rising to fight against the GMD forces, but that failed. So later on, Mao will retreat to this area known as the Jiangxi Soviet. And Mao was there with his forces at the Jiangxi Soviet from 1928 to 1934. Now, during this period of time as well, of course, the GMD knows that Mao is at the Jiangxi Soviet, so the GMD starts their encirclement campaigns and basically encircles the CCP. And the military situation was quite bad for the CCP, and so basically they later on will break out from these encirclement campaigns. But during this period also, take note, in 1930, there's this Futian incident where Mao purges people that he suspect were not loyal to him, or maybe go against his ideology, or suspected to be GMD so-called spies. During this period of time as well, Japan occupies Manchuria, and of course, Jiang allows this to occur because Jiang wants to focus on destroying the CCP. And as mentioned, because of the fact that the CCP was facing huge losses in Jiangxi, and because they were encircled, the CCP breaks out of Jiangxi and engages in the Long March. During this time, Jiang also launches the New Life movement, and in 35, as they were, embarking on the Long March, and during the Long March, the CCP has this so-called the Zuni Conference, and this Zuni Conference is very important because later on you realize that Mao becomes the undisputed leader within the CCP. And later on, as the CCP marches on, they head north to North China, and they establish later on known as the Yan'an Soviet. Okay, so this is a map. You can see the Jiangxi Soviet at the bottom, all right? So this is like an independent government established by Mao Zedong and Zhu De in Jiangxi province in southeastern China. Now, do take note that there are actually many Soviets in China. So the Jiangxi Soviet is just one of the many, but we're only going to focus largely on the Jiangxi Soviet because Mao was there and because it's one of the largest Soviets. And of course, from the Jiangxi Soviet, the CCP will embark on the Long March, right? So that's our focus, right? The Jiangxi Soviet. Now, what is the Long March? Okay, basically, it's about a 10,000 km trek of the Chinese communists resulted in their relocation from Jiangxi to Yan'an, okay, northwestern China. And it lasted about 1.5 years, 34 to 36. And of course, after the Long March, Mao becomes the undisputed party leader within the CCP. Some facts took them about 368 days, nearly 1 year and 3 days. And although they were retreating, the CCP tried to avoid clashes with the GMD, but do take note that battles did take place between the CCP and the GMD, and some of these battles later will attain legendary status in some sense for the CCP. Okay, only 20,000 of those who set out on the Long March survived. So when you think about the Long March, while they survived, you can see that the CCP was really by then quite a weakened military force. Now, if you look at this map over here, so you can see that K K here references the Jiangxi Soviet, all right, the Jiangxi Soviet. And so you can see that there are many actually other Soviets, C, H, W, but of course Jiangxi is the most significant. Okay, you can see Nanjing is over here. Okay, and of course, after the fifth GMD encirclement campaigns, because the CCP was losing, then basically they decided to break out of Jiangxi to embark on the Long March. You can see over here, 1935, January, this is the Zunyi Conference, which I talked about. And here, they met to discuss, the future and the fate of the CCP. And from here also, Mao Zedong emerges as the key leader, the undisputed leader of the CCP. And of course, they then continue up north, and later on, they establish the Yan'an Soviet. Now, according to CCP propaganda, why were they marching north to Yan'an? They argue that they are marching north to Yan'an because they want to fight the Japanese. So you can see that this was really quite a good propaganda in some sense. But in reality, they were obviously fleeing from the GMD. Yeah? Now, what is the Yan'an Decade? So after they have established, after they establish basically their forces at Yan'an, then the Yan'an Decade then emerges about 10 years, okay, from the time they establish their forces or their base in Yan'an till the end of World War II, all right? So it is, the Yan'an Decade refers to that period, because what happens that after World War II, the CCP and the GMD will start to fight again, and later on, the CCP will give up Yan'an during the Civil War. But we'll talk about this later when we talk about the Civil War. So the Yan'an Decade, this period, Mao pursued a firm policy against the Japanese, clearly because the Sino-Japanese War had broken out, and the Second United Front was established between Mao Zedong and the GMD to fight the Japanese. And in fighting the Japanese, basically, it helped actually bolster party numbers. During this period of time, even though the CCP was a weakened force when they reached Yan'an, but because of World War II, slowly but surely, the CCP forces would start to increase. Because now, a lot of the members had a purpose, and one of the purpose was obviously to fight the Japanese and to join this resistance against the Japanese. Now, do take note that some observers have argued that these crucial years are ultimately responsible for the 1949 revolution, arguing that Mao would not have won if not for the base support he gained at Yan'an. So Yan'an was actually quite a crucial period. From there, the PLA starts to grow, and from there he gets that base, which would be quite important later on when that base is strong enough to fight the GMD during the Civil War. Okay, so the Yan'an Decade ended during the Chinese Civil War, or what we call the Second Chinese Civil War, when Jiang attacked the city. All right. So usually for IB, we will look at the historical significance of two so-called issues. Right. One is how significant was the Jiangxi Soviet? And of course, the other one is how significant was the Long March. We're going to focus a bit on the Jiangxi Soviet, all right? So I'm going to just talk a bit about the Jiangxi Soviet for this HBL. Now, what was one significance of the Jiangxi Soviet? Well, one of it was that Mao's stature as a leader grew during this period, all right? So, as mentioned, after the failure of the autumn harvest uprising, Mao then retreated to the mountain range on the borders of Hunan and Jiangxi, known as Jingganshan. Okay, and there he starts to establish that so-called government, right? Later on, two other leaders will join him, Peng Dehuai and Zhu De. Okay, and so they will then basically lead the Jiangxi Soviet. Now, in January 1949, Mao moved to Ruijing in southern Jiangxi and, of course, established the Jiangxi Soviet. So you can see this is Jiangxi, all right, this is Jiangxi, and maybe you can see around surrounding Jiangxi, there are other areas like Fujian, Hunan, Hubei, Guangdong. Okay, but Jiangxi Soviet will be the area whereby Mao will establish its base. Now, during this period, Mao would introduce a few things, all right? Uh, Three key policies that would later on also be adopted when he leads in Yan'an, and even later on when he basically rules PRC, all right? The first policy really is the idea of guerrilla warfare and the three rules of the army, all right? So, what is guerrilla warfare? Basically, it's unconventional warfare. So, when we think about conventional warfare, we think about fighting that is direct. Okay, my army versus your army. All right. Usually, the army that is bigger will win the army that is smaller. But in unconventional warfare, it is usually used when you know that the enemy is huge, and therefore, if you attack it head on, naturally you're going to lose. If you attack it with conventional tactics because the enemy is larger, you will lose. So it is usually adopted when your forces are small and then you carry out tactics like ambush or small raids, right? Just to irritate the larger and less mobile former army. And guerrilla warfare was adopted because that was the situation the CCP was. Their military force was smaller than the GMD, so they had to use guerrilla warfare. But guerrilla warfare would prove somewhat quite effective to irritate the GMD. Now, the other thing that they introduced really were the three rules of the army. So the three rules to obey orders, right, to take nothing from the peasants, and to pull all captured goods. So, the idea of taking nothing from the peasants really is about the whole idea that we need to respect the peasants. And through this rule, actually, many peasants were won over and started to support the CCP. And the whole idea of pulling and capturing the goods really is that after you capture all the goods, then basically you will distribute the goods out, and everyone in some sense have a share. All right. Do take note, the army also introduced some, democratic practices or main practices that promoted equality. So the soldiers wore no badges of ranks, so it seems to promote the kind of equality. All receive the same pay, all share in the discussion of any proposed military action. And of course, all these policies would attract peasants and deserters from warlord and local military so-called forces. All right. Now, the second policy is the revolutionary land reform policies. So within a few years of arriving at Jiangxi, the communists had gained support of many of the peasants living under their rule. In 1930, they passed a land law and basically they divided the land among the farming population. And this is quite revolutionary in some sense, because then what happens is that peasants then begin to own the land, because the communists decided, okay, this land belongs to you. And so now they were masters of their own land. So when you think about Sun's principle, right, social livelihood, ironically, it was the communists that was achieving Sun's principle of so-called social livelihood and livelihood for the people, all right? And the communists also allowed the growth of peasant councils. So these councils will be developed and they have a say in running of their affairs. Now, the final one really is the third policy, social reforms in Jiangxi. So they set up schools and they abolish outmoded practices such as arranged marriages. And of course, women was treated as equals, because in a communist society, everyone is equal, right? Whether you're man or woman. So they were paid equally for their work. So obviously, all these policies, Mao's three key policies, obviously attracted many people, peasants, and also the women to join the CCP. And slowly but surely, the communists, okay, within Jiangxi, the party start to grow, and we call there's a slow rise towards communism. All right. Okay, I think I'm going to stop here for today's HBL. So we will see each other again the next time for lesson. So thank you so much, and please answer the MCQ questions in the Microsoft Forms. All right, have a great day, everyone. Thank you.